Facebook, I think, are watching us right now. So, hi, guys.
What's up, buddies? On Facebook. So, Jesse, we'll talk about these songs. You've been busy the last few years on the road. I think the last 4 years, almost nonstop. Actually, even recorded your newest record, "The Outsider." I think while you were touring. Is that right?
Tour, yeah,
Wow.
we did. Well, what happened was I did like 5 years of film stuff, and I kind of took off from touring. And then John Doe from X called and said, "Hey, do you want to do this tour with me?" And I said, "Yeah, of course." I mean, I couldn't turn that down. X is one of my favorite bands, and so I went with John, and we went and did Letterman and did all this stuff together. And he kind of brought me back out in front of a national audience, which, they had known me from my records in the past. But I mean, it's amazing how fast people forget if you take off and go do some movies and try to make a little cheddar for yourself. Yeah, so he brought me back out, and then I did that X tour, filling in for Billy Zoom, who's much better now. Original band from 1977, all back together. Yeah, and so we looked it up, and I think the longest we've been off is like maybe 2 weeks in the last 4 years. So we've been touring crazy.
I love the new record. It's awesome, and everybody
Thanks,
check it out, "The Outsider." I think actually it's sort of the perfect embodiment of this playlist that you've created. There's a little bit of sounds from all your influences. You got like that Texas blues, that kind of Cajun Louisiana sound.
Yeah.
You got little, outlaw country in there.
Yeah.
Your playlist that you built, it kind of runs the gamut. It's everything from like Motorhead to Toots and the Maytals to Johnny Cash and the Tennessee Three.
Yeah.
Maybe talk about how you've pulled from this wide range of influences over the course of your career.
Well, I grew up in Beaumont, Texas, which is right on the Texas-Louisiana border. So it's a very kind of hodgepodge gumbo of all kinds of music. I used to go to Zydeco festivals when I was a little kid, and I played in these like honky-tonk bands. I'd either be playing drums or bass or guitar, singing or whatever they wanted me to do with a lot of these old guys who were like, when I got older, I realized, oh, that was the guy who recorded with George Jones on the Star Day label. And some of these guys were legends. They were just the side guys, but hey, there's no front guys that don't do too good without some really good players around them. So anyway, all that stuff, and then I saw my first, before I saw the Clash in 1983. I was really young. I was into my brother's music, which was like, ZZ Top and Willie Nelson and Charlie Daniels Band and just Thin Lizzy and like all that classic rock before they started looking like girls. You know what I mean? Basically. I mean, they did kind of look like girls, but you know what I'm saying? Before like the whole 80s LA metal thing started. I was kind of into that. And then I saw the Clash, and I had this kind of, epiphany.
When the Clash, like you, shared this love for a wide range of music. They loved hip hop. They loved, ska and rock
Absolutely.
steady.
Yeah, they were listening to it all.
You mentioned great sidemen and the importance of the musicians that support. The first track on your playlist is "One Piece at a Time." Maybe Johnny Cash and the musicians who've played with him and his influence. I know you actually worked with Johnny for a little bit, right?
Yeah, briefly, and I got to hang out with him, and I just played with W.S. Holland, his drummer, like 3 months ago in Memphis.
He's a great guy.
Yeah, he's a great guy, but like Luther's simple Telecaster guitar playing, I know what it's like to be the side guy because I played, guitar for Waylon Jennings, and I played, with Glenn Campbell and Ray Price and Willie and all these people that I recorded with, and I still do it. Like I'm leaving next week after we get home to go play a couple of shows with my friend Ryan Bingham, who wants me to come out and play guitar with him. But those players, I mean, are so important. They're such an integral part of the sound. And I know people, most people don't. They just want to hear the lyric and hear the guy sing, and they're not really paying attention or whatever. But those tracks wouldn't matter without those guys.
It's that train rhythm, that boom chicka boom
Oh,
chicka
yeah.
boom chicka boom.
And I remember, my granddad riding in his old international truck, like down some country road, listening to Johnny Cash, and he had this voice like God.
Yeah.
And then when I met Johnny Cash, I met him. There's actual footage of us together that's on YouTube if you Google it.
No way.
And I look very young. I was a kid, but when he talked, it was like the guy that I heard on the radio when I was a little kid. Like he told me, "Are you gonna just stand there with your mouth open, or are you gonna come in and play guitar for us?" And anyway, the day that I met him, he'd just watched Aliens for the first time, and he was doing an impression of Bill Paxton, going, "We're all screwed and doomed, man." So it was like, "We're all screwed and doomed, man."
It's got to be cool for you to not only obviously see Johnny as a huge influence, but get to have the opportunity to work with him and the players who've played with him. That's got to be really cool.
Yeah, it is. All those guys, and I still, geek out when I meet people like that. Joe Strummer's wife just came out to a show in Texas, came all the way down to Texas to see me, who went and had dinner afterwards. And I'm always, it makes my heart smile.
You mentioned Waylon and Willie, both who also show up on your list. You have the great, one of Willie's probably signature songs, Whiskey River.
Yeah.
And I heard you during soundcheck doing a little Waylon's Lonesome, Ornery, and Mean.
Yeah.
Which sounded great, by the way.
Thanks,
your version's awesome. You talk about those two songs, kind of maybe a little more of the outlaw country sound.
Well, it's interesting. So I'm 52, right? So I remember the outlaw thing hitting. Up until that time, we were listening to my grandparents' country, which was like, Ray Price and Lefty Frizzell and stuff like that. And then my brother started getting we always knew those songs. I mean, I always tell people, I listen to the same thing you did, except I could go see Hank Jr., David Allan Coe, and Johnny Paycheck every weekend in my hometown. And most guys in Des Moines, Iowa didn't have that. Yeah. Not bagging on Des Moines, but, we had that component, but my brother got this Charlie Daniels Volunteer Jam record, and I looked on it and I was like, okay, so the Allman Brothers and Willie are on the same thing. I mean, even at that young age, I knew that country and rock didn't really go together up until that point. But this all started in Austin.
And that country rock sound plays an important role. Like you have Neil Young's Harvest on your playlist.
Absolutely.
Which is, kind of, in many ways, that was sort of a country record for Neil. It has, I think, Old Man is on that record. And
he wrote he wrote Are You Ready for the Country for Waylon, which was a big hit. And of course, none of the country fans know that, especially the ones who are kind of like, well, we don't listen to that long-haired rock and roll stuff. Well, it's like, well, if you're listening to that song, you are, sweetheart, because Neil Young wrote it.
When I hear off your new record, Changing My Ways, I think a little bit about Neil Young's Harvest.
Yeah. I'm a big Neil Young fan. I love the songs, Harvest, all those acoustic records, are so important. And I remember them, my parents would vacation in Colorado. Like all good Texans, we would get out of the heat and go to the mountains. And Neil was everywhere when I was a little kid, everywhere. And the first three songs I ever learned on the guitar were Hey, Hey, My, by Neil Young, Hey, Good Looking by Hank Williams, and Hey, Joe by Hendrix. Wow. So I learned 3 Hey songs.
You could have done some Ramones and gotten all 4 of them. So, we talk about country. Obviously, a really important influence for you, but the blues as well. And coming from Texas, that kind of that East Texas blues, no surprise. You have, songs like Slim Harpo's "I'm a King Bee," kind of that swamp rock sound.
Yeah, out of Louisiana.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that was out of Crowley, Louisiana. They had a label there called Excello Records. And the guy's named Slim Harpo, and there would be no Rolling Stones.
Yeah.
I mean, there literally would be no Rolling Stones without Slim Harpo.
I think the Stones do that song
They
on
do.
their debut record, right?
They do a bunch of it. They do Hip Shake on Exile on Main Street. I'm a huge Stones fan. It's like my favorite rock and roll band.
You got Some Girls on your list also.
I got Some Girls. But yeah, the blues thing. So when I was a kid, there was this guy named Clifford Antone who owned Antone's Blues Club in Austin, and it's where Stevie and Jimmy and the Sexton Brothers, a lot of people started out there. I was always a little too hillbilly, but I loved being around it. You know, I mean, they were the first night Clifford brought me up on stage. I was a kid, and he goes, "You know, we're gonna have to bring you over to the Broken Spoke because you can sing like George Jones, and this is a different. We're gonna introduce you to these country guys." But I love the blues, and he actually wanted me to be a blues guitar player when I was a kid, and he gave me all the right records. I was like 15. I got Magic Sam, Slim Harpo, you know, all that
Hopkins.
Lightning. I mean, Mance Lipscomb, all this stuff.
It's not just country and blues. And you got Motorhead on the list. And, you know, Motorhead often gets put into that new wave of British heavy metal. They always wanted to be considered a true rock and roll band.
Exactly.
But they got put into that metal category. What about Motorhead's music really influenced you?
Well, when I go to the gym, I can't work out to Buck Owens. I love Buck Owens. But when I go to the gym, I want to work out to Lemmy, you know, or something that it's just that whole thing. And the thing about Motorhead that people don't realize is that Lemmy was right in the smack dab in the middle of the whole punk scene. And they all loved him. He was not considered like, you know, the dumb Hessian guy who was just, you know. So he's like in his own kind of world. He's got this kind of punk rock and roll. I don't think he liked to be called metal.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you a funny story about Lemmy. My friend Slim Jim Phantom from the Stray Cats had a band with Lemmy, and he goes, "Hey man, they're gonna debut the new Lemmy documentary at the Austin South by Southwest Film Festival." And he goes, "I know Lem's going to want to go have a few drink some Jack and Cokes, his signature drink." And he goes, "I don't really drink, so why don't you come along and have some drinks and show us anyway." So about 5 o'clock in the morning, Lemmy drops me off in this town car with a sunroof. And I knock on the door because my wife's obviously locked me out. And I knock on the door and she goes, "Dude, where have you been?" I pointed out there, and Lemmy's got him and this girl are standing outside of the sunroof in this limousine. And she goes, "Is that Lemmy?" And I said, "Yeah." And she goes, "Come on in, I'll get you some water and aspirin." But he was a cool guy. He told me that right before I got out of the car, he grabbed my arm and he goes, "The most dangerous man in the history of rock and roll is a gay black dishwasher named Richard from Macon, Georgia."
Yeah. You know, he loved rock and roll. A few years back, probably 2012, we honored Chuck Berry. It was like a big week-long tribute, and Lemmy came out because he really wanted to honor Chuck. And I think people often would lose sight of that Lemmy and Motorhead's influence. Again, they get
rock
seen in the metal, but it's rock and roll, and they believe that they were making rock and roll music at that time.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Fast and Loose is a track that you chose for your playlist.
Yeah, because it kind of swings.
Yeah.
Which after, you know, like, I don't know, 79, 80, a lot of those metal bands came in and they didn't swing anymore. And I love all those early hard rock records before that stuff. And I love that Lemmy and people like that were smart enough to hear the country influence in rock and roll.
Yeah.
Which is almost dead at this point, you know? And, you know, a lot of those guys were just hillbilly cats that were just like, okay, let's rev it up and get rid of the steel player.
You mentioned, you know, it's that country influence. You have Townes Van Zandt on your list too.
Yeah.
Really beautiful song. To Live is to Fly. Again, one of his probably maybe best, you know, well-known songs.
Yeah.
Towns, I actually, Towns was known for like living life on the road, living in motels and cabins. I have to imagine you probably share some kinship after your 4-year experience just being out on the road.
Yeah.
Do you feel the connection with an artist who kind of had those experiences?
I did. I mean, I was on the road for a long time up until I was working on this movie stuff, and I always had that feeling. I used to go see Towns at Anderson Fair. And if he hadn't had too much to drink, it was like seeing Bob Dylan and Hank Williams all rolled into one. It was like chicken skin.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it'd be just us and the wait staff. But there's a lot of guys now in Texas. Not a lot. There's a few younger guys like Hayes Carl, and not that they're that young anymore, but Hayes Carl and Ryan Bingham both are kind of carrying that tradition, and of course those first Robert Earl Keen records, and so Towns is like, if you want to be a great songwriter, just go buy a Towns record. I mean, you can buy a Steve Earle record, who was heavily influenced by Towns, and I'm the biggest Steve fan ever. But go back and buy a couple of Towns records and dissect them and spend 10,000 hours with them, and it'll show you how to, it'll show you how to be a great songwriter, and the other stuff kind of leave that with him.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And most of those Towns records were produced by Cowboy Jack Clement, which we know also from Sun Records. So again, I love your playlist because there's so many of these really cool connections that you can tie that Clash song, Brand New Cadillac, which is a cover of a 1950s rockabilly song. And so you see your rockabilly influence through your influence of the Clash, who are influenced by Toots and the Maytals, who also show up on your list. I just love those connections.
Yeah,
you have great independent choices.
Thanks for seeing that.
Yeah, man, for sure.
And Jack Clement, he had a radio show, and he used to play my songs on there on XM Sirius. And Jack Clement was down in Beaumont, Texas, which is my hometown. They had a label down there called Star Day Records. And Chet Atkins called him after he left Sun Records and said, "Hey, man, I got you a gig in Nashville. It's going to pay a ton of money." He said, "Man, I can't do it. I'm down here with these Cajuns and George Jones in Beaumont, Texas." And he thought he was crazy. But he really he was a revolutionary.
Yeah, Jack was a great guy, good friend of
brilliant
ours.
guy.
Maybe we can end, but there's 2 more songs I want to talk about because I think they were really cool inclusions on your list. One was "Dirty Old Town" by the Pogues.
Yeah.
A group that maybe doesn't get their just attention these days, but super influential.
Super influential. Well, I love writers, and my parents were kind of the first ones to make it out of the blue collar world and kind of get educations, and they gave me books and stuff like that. So when I would read Shane MacGowan's words, I mean, it was like reading James Joyce or some great Irish writer, Oscar Wilde or whoever. But this Irish punk rock thing that's so huge right now wouldn't have started without the Pogues. And I got to see the Pogues back in the day. There's a girl who played bass for the Pogues named Rocky O'Riordan, who I'm friends with. And I just adore everything they do. And those kind of, I think they made music kind of smarter you go to their crowd and you see a bunch of really drunk Irish people. And you're like, I don't know. But if you listen to their words, I mean, Shane was probably a writer in a different life,
When I hear "Burning" off your new record, I hear a little Pogues influence there too.
Absolutely. There's stuff there. And, I got to see them in Europe a long, long time ago when Joe Strummer was fronting the band, when Shane was drinking too much. And there's just a whole kind of thing there that, we've always been robbing each other. Like America and the UK and Jamaica, Africa, like all these continents are constantly robbing each other's musical influences. I mean, we did it, that's how blues and country were invented. That's how rock and roll came about. And now it's cool that the English guys came in, like after Elvis went to, after he got drafted, and Jerry Lee got shut down, and you know, all these guys kind of, Gene and Eddie got in the car wreck, and thank God we had the Stones, you know, to save us. So
the last track on your playlist, and it kind of comes full circle from an earlier story you were telling, is X's Sugar Light. So maybe given your relationship and knowing those, you know, the guys from X and playing with them, talk about that. That's from their debut record. Talk about X and that music from Los Angeles.
Well, that song was always my favorite to play on tour because it was just super high energy rock and roll punk stuff that just drove everybody nuts. And I remember when Los Angeles came out, and I was like, whoa, this is weird. Like, I looked at Billy Zoom, and I was like, he looks like a rockabilly guy. And it was just so different and so fresh. And but, you know, that band, like, it was hard for me to get to know them personally because I had romanticized their music like a lot of musicians I did. But once I got to work with them, and I will say this, Exene and John are probably the most uncompromising, the highest level of like respect for the music of anybody I've ever, like if somebody came to Exene and John and said, hey, you know, if you just change that one little guitar part right there, this song will be a #1 song for you and sell 1 million copies, they'd both look at you like you're out of your mind. They're like, you know, and that's, just being around that was, it was just great.
It's cool that you bookend your playlist with Johnny Cash to X. A few years ago, we honored Johnny in his life, and X came out, and Exene was here, and John was here, and they're so influenced by Johnny as well. So it was cool to see that lineage carry out. Jesse, it's an awesome playlist. Again, everyone out there, follow our guest sets, Jesse Dayton playlist. Look us up on Spotify. Find us on Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Make sure you check out The Outsider. It's a brand new record. It's killer. And you're gonna, if you like some of those artists we talked about today, you're gonna hear the influence in Jesse's great music. He'll be playing here in about an hour and a half downstairs. And you can check out the whole rest of our Rock Hall Live calendar at rockhall.com. And stay tuned for more of these guest sets. We'll be doing more with some other great artists. But until then, rock on, everybody. Thanks, Jesse.
Thanks, man.
So shake the dust off of your wings, sleep out of your eyes. I'll shake the dust off of your wings and tears out of your eyes.